All right, day 3 of weather, page 228, chapter 6, lesson 1, tracking weather. Tracking weather. Weather affects people's lives every day. People want to know if snow is likely to fall, if a day will be particularly hot, or if storms are approaching. Weather affects what people wear and their activities. So, affects life. Want to predict. Weather observers use a wide variety of instruments to gather weather data. They use thermometers to measure air temperature and hygrometers to measure humidity. Wind speed is measured with an anemometer. Precipitation is measured with a rain gauge. So, instruments gather data, temperature, humidity, wind speed and direction, precipitation, air pressure. Air pressure is measured with a barometer. Changes in air pressure, or barometric pressure, are important indicators of future weather. Falling barometric pressure indicates a low pressure system is approaching. Rain followed by cooler weather might be expected. If the pressure is falling rapidly, a storm is likely. If the pressure is steady, the weather is likely to remain the same. Rising pressure indicates the approach of a high pressure system. Clear skies and fair weather typically are expected. Conditions in the upper atmosphere influence weather at Earth's surface. Weather balloons carry instruments to high altitudes to measure air pressure, temperature, wind speed, and wind direction. They also carry radio transmitters to send data to a receiver on the ground. Weather satellites send images of weather systems, including storms, to weather stations on the ground. So, images. Weather forecasters use this information and other tools to predict the weather. They depend on radar for information about storms. Radar can show details about a storm, such as whether it contains hail or is likely to produce a tornado. Computer modeling is also a valuable tool in predicting the weather. Radar models. You can find weather information on the internet, on the radio, in the newspaper, and on television. Learning about weather gives you a chance to make your own weather predictions. Okay, weather forecasters use a variety of tools and instruments to collect data about the atmosphere. We wrote that. Instruments gather data. Want to predict. How do tools help forecast the weather? Tools help forecast the weather by helping us gather data that can allow us to predict the weather. All right, now it's time for the Phase 2, highlighting and annotating. Remember, we are looking for key details that support this main idea. So, lesson wrap-up, visual summary. Main idea, differences in air pressure, heat, air movement, and humidity cause changes in the weather. Highlight all of that yellow. Uneven heating of Earth's surface by the sun causes differences in air pressure. Okay, air pressure, highlight it because they use that. Down here in winds, uneven heating, they said that. Different air pressure, differences in air pressure. Wind. Winds blow from regions of high pressure to regions of low pressure. High pressure, wind, low pressure. Okay. The water cycle includes evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Evaporation, when it goes from liquid to gas. Condensation, gas to liquid, forming a cloud basically. Precipitation, falling like rain, snow, sleet, or hail. The water cycle is powered by energy from the sun. Okay? The water cycle is powered by energy from the sun, and it has those three parts: evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Differences in pressure, heat, air movement, and humidity result in changes of weather. Okay, humidity, changes of weather, movement, weather change. So when air masses move, it results in weather change. Okay. In fronts, change in weather. So a front causes changes in weather. That's when the air masses are moving. And then they mention all these things. Okay, pressure, there's air pressure. Heat, that's basically temperature. Air movement, we talked about the movement in air masses, in fronts, and now wind speed and direction. And humidity. Humidity. Okay, let's go back here to the beginning. Humidity. Okay, so what should be highlighted? Main idea, air pressure, condensation, evaporation, humidity, precipitation. In the winds section, uneven heating, different air pressure, wind, high pressure, wind, low pressure. The water cycle, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, energy coming from the sun. The section on humidity, movement of air masses causes weather change. Fronts cause weather change because those are the air masses moving. In tracking weather, we have temperature, humidity, wind speed and direction, and air pressure. Okay, now, get the red pen, and we're going to annotate key details that support the main idea. So we're looking for differences. We want differences in these things: air pressure, heat, air movement, humidity, those four things, and those cause changes in weather. Okay? So, differences. Differences in air pressure. How do we get differences? Uneven heating. What does all of that cause? Wind. Why do we care about the wind? Because the wind makes fronts move, or it makes air masses move. And those are fronts, right? The front is the boundary between the air masses, and we learned that when that boundary moves, we get changes in weather. Okay, so we just put a little star down here in winds. Good. Now, the water cycle, all of those phases, right? That is weather. You're getting evaporation, condensation, precipitation. Rain, snow, and hail is the weather. So the water cycle is very important to all of that. Okay, humidity. We're going to put a star by humidity, and we're going to put a star next to this, where we said that if you increase water vapor, in other words, the amount of water in the air, or you decrease temperature, it gets colder and denser, you're going to get condensation and precipitation. That's really important because the amount of water in the air relates back to the energy. So the more water you have in the air, the more chance you have of precipitation. So the more chance you have of changes in weather. And humidity is a big part of that. Okay, air masses. A movement of air mass results in weather change. Well, there it is, air movement. So we're annotating that one. Fronts we're annotating because those are the boundaries. The boundary is where all this stuff happens. The pressure is changing, the temperature is different, there's movement, different humidities. All those differences are at the front. That's the boundary. Okay, so let's put a star next to boundary because that's where all the differences are. And then down here in tracking weather, we use instruments to gather data about all those differences. Wind speed and direction are especially important because of those moving fronts. All right, so phase 3, I know. Also, I predict or I wonder. Phase 4, what might it sound like? Differences in air pressure, heat, air movement, and humidity cause changes in the weather. Uneven heating of the Earth's surface due to the sun's energy causes differences in air pressure. Those differences in air pressure result in wind blowing from high pressure areas towards low pressure areas. Okay. The sun's energy powers the water cycle, evaporating water, which cools and condenses high in the atmosphere, and eventually there's precipitation of the rain and snow and hail. Then let's see. Humidity plays an important part in weather because the amount of water or the temperature greatly affect condensation and precipitation. In other words, the more water vapor in the air or the colder the temperature, the more clouds and rain and snow you're going to have. Let's see, something here. When air masses move, they result in weather changes. The weather changes at the fronts or the boundaries of those air masses. Those differences cause the change in weather, and we use instruments to gather all sorts of data in order to predict the weather. All right, something like that. Okay, I'll do one last scan in case you need to pause the video. Make sure that your highlights and your annotations match mine. And to make sure that you understand the content. Understand that air pressure leads to winds, that the uneven heating from the sun is helping drive and power that. High pressure tends to be cold and blow towards the warm, low pressure. The sun basically powers the water cycle, and the warmth and the cool helps drive that cycle also. Humidity in the air determines when you're going to have clouds or rain or snow. The air masses moving is weather change, and all those differences and changes are happening at the front or the boundary between masses. We track weather with instruments that gather a lot of data, and we can use all that data to try to predict what's going to happen with the weather in the future. All right, good job persevering with the growth mindset. Roar, Wildcats!